I am Verlaine, 19 years old, and standing at a crossroads few people my age have to face. When I walked out of my stepdad Harold's house last year, I never imagined my mother would come crawling back, only when her financial pipeline dried up. The sudden text from her after months of silence said it all. Not "I miss you" or "I'm sorry," but "We need to talk about your education money." Funny how family ties magically strengthen when bank accounts weaken. The irony would be amusing if it didn't hurt so much. Before I dive into this messy family saga, where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and stay with me to see how I finally learned that sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make. My earliest memories are bathed in golden California sunshine. Before everything fell apart, I remember weekends at the beach with both my parents building sandcastles with my dad, while my mum took endless photos for her social media. Dad would always make me laugh by burying my feet in the sand and pretending he couldn't find them. Those moments feel like they belong to a different lifetime now. My grandfather William. My mother Jessica's father was always my biggest supporter. A retired high school principal with silver hair and kind eyes. He would visit every Sunday for dinner, always bringing me books about science and nature. "This brain of yours is going to change the world someday," he would say, tapping my forehead gently. My mother would roll her eyes, but smile indulgently. Even then, I sensed she didn't quite understand my curious nature, but at least she seemed proud of it. The first signs that my mother wasn't emotionally present came gradually. She was always physically there, making meals and driving me to school, but her attention was constantly divided between her phone, her appearance, and the latest neighborhood gossip. When I would try to tell her about something I learned or a book I was reading, her eyes would glaze over. "That's nice, honey," she would say, already scrolling through her phone. I was 8 when my world shattered. I came home from school one day to find my dad sitting on the couch, suitcase beside him. Mom was standing by the window, arms crossed, face set like stone. That image is seared into my memory like a photograph. "Verlaine, your father and I are getting a divorce," she said in a voice so calm it was frightening. My father tried to explain that they had grown apart, that they wanted different things, but all I heard was that he was leaving. The weeks that followed were a blur of confusion and tears. My father moved into an apartment across town, and I spent every other weekend with him at first. But as months passed, his calls became less frequent. His weekend visits often cancelled at the last minute due to work emergencies. By my 9th birthday, he had accepted a job offer in Seattle, making visits even rarer. Each cancelled visit, each missed call, chipped away at my heart until I learned to expect disappointment. My mother struggled financially after the divorce. My father's child support payments were irregular, and though she had a job as an administrative assistant at a local real estate office, it wasn't enough to maintain the lifestyle she wanted. This is when grandfather stepped in, offering to help with expenses, particularly anything related to my education. "Nothing is more important than Verlaine's future," he insisted, and for that I will always be grateful. The summer I turned 10, my mother introduced me to Harold. He was tall and broad-shouldered with a neatly trimmed beard and an expensive watch that he kept checking. "This is my special friend," she said, her voice higher than normal, her smile a bit too bright. Harold patted my head like I was a pet and asked if I liked basketball. When I said I preferred books, he laughed as if I had made a joke. Their relationship moved at lightning speed. Within 6 months, they were engaged, and we were packing up our small but comfortable house to move into Harold's larger home in an upscale neighborhood 30 minutes away. I remember boxing up my books, tears streaming silently down my face, knowing I would have to leave my school, my few friends, and the only home I'd known since my father left. Harold's house was modern and pristine, with white furniture that children weren't supposed to sit on and glass tables that showed every fingerprint. He had 2 sons from his previous marriage, Tyler and Brandon, who were 15 and 17. They visited on weekends, loud and boisterous, tracking mud through the immaculate house, while Harold laughed indulgently. When I accidentally left a book on the coffee table, however, Harold's voice would turn cold. "We need to establish some rules about personal belongings, Verlaine." The different treatment was obvious from the beginning. When Tyler and Brandon raided the refrigerator, they were growing boys. When I took an extra cookie, I was developing bad habits. My mother witnessed these double standards, but said nothing, her once protective instincts now subservient to her desire to please Harold. I watched her transform from an independent, albeit somewhat detached mother into someone who constantly sought approval from her new husband. My refuge became books and schoolwork. If I couldn't find comfort at home, I would create my own world through learning. I decorated my new room with solar system models and posters of marine life. Harold called it cluttered, but it was the only space that felt like mine. At night, I would often hear them arguing about money, about me, about the financial burden my education represented. My mother's voice would start strong, but always eventually give way to Harold's more dominant tone. Middle school brought increasing tension to our household. Harold exerted control over every aspect of our lives, particularly finances. My mother handed over her paychecks to him, and he would dole out an allowance for her personal expenses. The power dynamic was clear, and it affected how she interacted with me. She became even more emotionally detached, rarely asking about my day or my interests, seemingly exhausted by the effort of maintaining her marriage. One evening, I overheard Harold lecturing my mother about a sweater she had bought me. "Did you clear this purchase with me first? We have a budget, Jessica. Your daughter doesn't need designer clothes for school." The sweater wasn't designer at all, just a simple blue cardigan from a department store sale, but arguing facts with Harold was pointless. My mother apologized profusely, promising to do better with money. I felt a mix of anger and pity watching her diminish herself. School became my sanctuary. I threw myself into academics, particularly science classes. My 8th grade science teacher, Ms. Lawrence, noticed my fascination with marine ecosystems and encouraged me to join the science club. For the first time since the divorce, I felt truly seen and appreciated for who I was. My grades were excellent, and I began winning awards at science fairs and academic competitions. Grandfather was my only consistent supporter at home. He would drive 30 minutes each way just to attend my science competitions, when neither my mother nor Harold could find the time. When I won first place in the regional science fair with a project on coral reef conservation, Grandfather took me out for ice cream and listened intently as I explained every detail of my research. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're going to make a real difference in this world." At school, I discovered my passion for marine biology during a class field trip to the local aquarium. Something clicked as I watched the grace of manta rays and the delicate dance of sea anemones with their clownfish partners. Ms. Lawrence noticed my fascination and lent me books about marine conservation and ocean ecosystems. "You have a real gift for understanding biological relationships," she told me after I completed an extra credit project on symbiotic relationships in tide pools. When I excitedly shared my newfound passion at dinner, Harold scoffed. "Marine biology, what kind of practical career is that? Scientists are always begging for grants and living paycheck to paycheck." My mother stared at her plate, saying nothing as my enthusiasm was crushed under his dismissal. Later that night, she came to my room and sat awkwardly on the edge of my bed. "Harold just wants what's best for you," she said softly. "Maybe think about something more reliable." But I couldn't let go of my dream. Throughout high school, I maintained perfect grades in science classes and joined every related extracurricular activity I could find. I volunteered at the aquarium on weekends, learning directly from marine biologists and developing valuable skills for my future career. Each small accomplishment felt like an act of rebellion against Harold's narrow vision of success. The summer before my junior year, I worked at a local cafe to save money for college, knowing I would need every penny. Harold disapproved, claiming it would distract from academics, but I persisted. My mother attended exactly one school event that year, a parent-teacher conference she couldn't avoid, and missed my presentation at the State Science Symposium, despite promising to be there. The empty seat beside Grandfather in the audience spoke volumes about where her priorities lay. Senior year brought the stress of college applications. I applied to 7 universities with strong marine biology programs, spending hours perfecting my essays and personal statements. Grandfather drove me to campus tours and helped me research scholarship opportunities. When my acceptance letter from Pacific Coast University arrived with a partial scholarship offer, I was ecstatic. PCU had one of the top marine biology programs in the country, with research opportunities and internships that could launch my career. The celebration was short-lived. When I showed the acceptance letter to my mother and Harold over dinner, his response was immediate and crushing. "We're not paying for this," he declared, setting down his fork with finality. "If you want to waste 4 years studying fish, you can find a way to pay for it yourself." My mother's eyes darted between us, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, she attempted a weak compromise. "Maybe community college first. To save money, then you could transfer." "I earned a scholarship," I countered, my voice shaking with emotion, "and I've been saving from my job. I'm not asking for much, just some help with what isn't covered." Your savings wouldn't cover a semester of books, Harold scoffed. Be realistic, Verlaine. Choose a practical major at the state university like accounting or business, and we can discuss support. That night, I called grandfather in tears explaining the situation. His response changed everything. Don't worry about the money, he said firmly. I've been saving for your education since the day you were born. PCU is where you belong, and I'll make sure you get there. Your dreams matter, Verlaine. When grandfather informed my mother and Harold of his intention to fully fund my education, the atmosphere at home grew even more tense. Harold was clearly resentful of what he perceived as undermining his authority. Your father has always spoiled her, he told my mother loud enough for me to hear from the next room. No wonder she thinks she deserves special treatment. My first semester at Pacific Coast University was like breathing fresh air after years of suffocation. My roommate Lisa was a psychology major with a quick laugh and an easygoing personality that made our shared dorm room feel like a sanctuary. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells or measuring my words. We would stay up late discussing our classes, our dreams, and occasionally watching terrible reality TV shows that made us laugh until our sides hurt. The campus was beautiful, situated along the California coastline, with easy access to tide pools and marine environments for field studies. My Introduction to Marine Biology course confirmed that I had made the right choice. Professor Winters, a woman in her 50s, who had spent decades studying marine mammal communication, became an immediate role model. The ocean holds more mysteries than space, she told our class on the first day, and some of you in this room will be the ones to uncover them. I limited my communication with my mother and Harold to occasional text messages. Our conversations had become superficial anyway, a surface-level exchange of "how are you" and "fine" that revealed nothing and meant even less. My mother would sometimes ask about classes in a generic way, but never specifically about marine biology. It was as if acknowledging my major would somehow betray Harold. Grandfather, on the other hand, called me every Sunday without fail. He wanted to hear every detail about my classes, my professors, and my new friends. When I received an A on my first major research paper, he insisted on driving up to campus to take me to dinner in celebration. Over pasta at a small Italian restaurant near campus, he shared stories about my mother as a young girl before she became so focused on appearances and status. Your mother was curious like you once, he said, twirling spaghetti around his fork. She used to collect butterflies and press flowers for scientific observation. Somewhere along the way, she lost that spark. His eyes grew sad for a moment before he brightened again. But you've got enough spark for both of you. The real turning point came when Professor Winters offered me an opportunity to assist with her research on dolphin communication patterns. It was unusual for a first-semester freshman to receive such an offer, and I was both honoured and terrified. The work was demanding, requiring early morning data collection several days a week, but it was also thrilling to be part of real scientific research. Winter break loomed like a dark cloud over my newfound happiness. I considered making excuses to stay on campus, but ultimately decided to go home, partly out of obligation and partly from a lingering hope that things might have improved in my absence. They hadn't. Within hours of my return, I felt the familiar tension seeping into my shoulders, my speech patterns shifting back to careful, measured responses designed to avoid conflict. Harold barely acknowledged my arrival, grunting a greeting without looking up from his newspaper. My mother gave me a quick, awkward hug before immediately launching into complaints about the Christmas party they had attended the previous weekend. On my third day home, I returned from a coffee meetup with high school friends to find my bedroom door ajar. Something felt off, though nothing was visibly disturbed. Call it intuition or simply knowing Harold's controlling nature, but I immediately checked my journal, which I kept tucked between my mattress and box spring. It had been moved, the pages clearly thumbed through. Violation and rage boiled inside me. That journal contained my most private thoughts, including criticisms of Harold and my disappointment in my mother. I confronted him in the living room where he sat watching a football game. "You read my journal," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my shaking hands. He didn't even deny it. "As long as you live under my roof, there's no such thing as privacy," he said, eyes still on the television. "Maybe if you didn't write such disrespectful things, I wouldn't need to check up on you." My mother entered from the kitchen, her expression alarmed. "What's going on?" "Harold read my private journal," I said, turning to her for support, still naive enough to expect it. She twisted her hands in her apron. "Verlaine, you shouldn't leave personal things lying around." "It was under my mattress," I countered, disbelief coloring my voice. He searched my room. Harold stood now, his 6-foot frame towering over me. Don't take that tone in my house. You've become incredibly disrespectful since starting that liberal college, writing that we're controlling and unsupportive when we've put a roof over your head for years. Grandfather is putting a roof over my head now, I said, unable to stop myself, and paying for an education you tried to deny me. The argument escalated quickly, with Harold listing every perceived offence and act of ingratitude since my childhood, painting himself as the long-suffering provider for an ungrateful stepdaughter. My mother stood silently witnessing the entire exchange, occasionally making weak attempts to calm Harold, but never once defending me. When I looked to her with tears in my eyes and asked, "Do you even care how he treats me?" she looked away and whispered, "Just apologize, Verlaine. Please, for peace in the house." In that moment, something broke inside me. I saw with perfect clarity that nothing would ever change here. My mother would never stand up for me, would never prioritize my well-being over her husband's ego. I walked out of the room, hands trembling as I called grandfather. The next day, Harold issued his ultimatum over breakfast. "Things need to change around here," he announced as if delivering a corporate presentation. "First, I want access to your bank statements. If we're supporting you, we should know where your money goes." I looked up from my untouched toast. "You're not supporting me. Grandfather is." He continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Second, this marine biology nonsense ends now. Transfer to state for business administration next semester, or the financial support from this household stops completely." "Harold," my mother interjected weakly, "maybe we could compromise." "There's no compromise with ungrateful children, Jessica." He turned back to me. "Those are the terms. Think it over today. I want your decision by dinner." My decision was made long before dinner. That night, after they had gone to bed, I packed my essential belongings into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Clothes, books, my laptop, and important documents. I left behind the furniture and decorations that could be replaced, focusing only on what truly mattered. I wrote a note to my mother, tears blurring my vision as I explained that I couldn't continue living in a home where I was neither respected nor supported. I told her I loved her, but was disappointed that she had chosen a controlling husband over her daughter's well-being. I didn't write anything for Harold. Grandfather had arranged for me to stay with his sister, my great-aunt Patricia, who lived near campus until student housing reopened for spring semester. As I quietly wheeled my suitcases down the driveway at 2 a.m, I felt a complex mixture of grief, relief, and terrifying freedom. My mother's response came the next day in a barrage of text messages that swung wildly between guilt-inducing sorrow and angry accusations. "How could you leave without saying goodbye?" followed by "Your selfishness is breaking this family apart." And then, "Please come home, we can work this out." But notably absent was any acknowledgement of her role in the situation or any promise to actually change the dynamic. I responded simply, "I need time and space. I'm safe and will be continuing at PCU as planned. Please respect my decision." Then I silenced my phone and allowed myself to cry until no more tears would come. The next few months were a crash course in independent living. After staying with great-aunt Patricia for 2 weeks, I moved into a small apartment near campus with Lisa, who had been looking for a roommate after her original housing arrangement fell through. The apartment was nothing fancy, a small 2-bedroom with mismatched furniture and temperamental plumbing, but it was ours. No one monitored our coming and going. No one inspected our space for infractions of arbitrary rules. No one made us feel like unwelcome guests. Budgeting became a new skill I had to master quickly. Grandfather's support covered tuition and basic living expenses, but I took a part-time job at the campus bookstore to pay for extras and to build my own financial safety net. Every dollar I saved felt like another brick in the wall of independence I was constructing. Lisa introduced me to her friends, a diverse group of students from different majors who welcomed me without question. Movie night study sessions and occasional weekend hikes became the framework of my new social life. For someone who had spent years isolated in an emotionally barren household, the easy camaraderie was both foreign and intoxicating. My mother's contact attempts fell into a predictable pattern. She would text sporadically, usually surface-level inquiries about my classes or comments about the weather, carefully avoiding any mention of Harold or the circumstances of my departure. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining firm boundaries around my new life. Grandfather remained my rock, visiting at least twice a month and calling regularly. He never pressured me to reconcile with my mother, but gently encouraged me to keep the door open for a relationship on new terms. People can change, he would say, but only when they're ready and only on their own timeline. Your job is to live your life, not wait for hers to begin. My academic life flourished without the constant stress of walking on eggshells at home. I maintained a 3.9 GPA and continued working with Professor Winters on her dolphin communication research. By the end of spring semester, she invited me to join a selective summer research program that would involve field work at a marine research station on Catalina Island. The invitation was a professional triumph, but it also represented personal growth. 6 months earlier, I might have hesitated, worrying about family reactions or lacking confidence in my abilities. Now I accepted immediately, excited for the opportunity and secure in my right to pursue it. Therapy became another important part of my new life. The university offered free counseling services, and Lisa gently encouraged me to take advantage of them. Everyone needs support processing family stuff, she said with the wisdom of someone who had been there herself. Dr. Kim, my therapist, helped me understand the dynamics of my family situation. What you've described contains elements of emotional neglect, she explained in our third session. Your mother's inability to prioritize your emotional needs and your stepfather's controlling behavior created an environment where your legitimate needs were consistently devalued. Those sessions were often painful, bringing up memories and feelings I had suppressed for years. I cried, remembering all the times I had achieved something meaningful only to have it dismissed or ignored. I expressed anger at my mother's consistent failure to protect me from Harold's controlling behavior. I grieved the relationship I had wanted with her but never received. But therapy also gave me tools to establish healthy boundaries and recognize harmful patterns before they could affect me. I learned that my worth wasn't dependent on parental approval, and that I had the right to create distance from relationships that caused me pain. Perhaps most importantly, I began to understand my biological father's absence as his failure, not mine. For years, I had internalized the belief that he left because I wasn't important enough to stay for. Now I recognize that adults make choices based on their own limitations and weaknesses, not because their children are unworthy of love. Weekends with grandfather became a cherished routine. Sometimes we would simply have dinner and talk about books or current events. Other times we would take day trips to nearby coastal towns, exploring tide pools and visiting small aquariums. He never pushed me about my mother, but would occasionally share stories from her childhood and adolescence, helping me understand the complex person she was, beyond her role as my disappointing mother. 1 year after leaving Harold's house, Lisa organized a small celebration dinner with our friend group. To independence, she toasted, raising her glass of sparkling cider, and to choosing your own family. That night, I received a text from my mother that felt different from her usual messages. I saw your research project was mentioned in the university newsletter online. I'm proud of you, Verlaine. No guilt, no passive-aggressive undertones, just a simple expression of pride. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that reconciliation might someday be possible, though not without significant changes. My sophomore year started with even more momentum. My summer research experience had opened doors leading to an expanded role in Professor Winters' lab and recommendations for prestigious academic opportunities. I was finding my place in the scientific community, developing the professional relationships that would shape my future career. My social circle had expanded to include students with similar research interests. We formed study groups that often evolved into friendship groups, supporting each other through difficult classes and celebrating academic victories together. After years of isolation in Harold's house, I reveled in these genuine connections. Communication with my mother had settled into a new pattern. We exchanged text messages every week or two, superficial but cordial. She would ask about my classes in general terms, and I would respond with basic updates, never sharing anything too personal or meaningful. I had learned to expect little, and thus wasn't disappointed by her limited engagement. Grandfather had become more than just a financial supporter. He was my mentor, my family, and often my biggest cheerleader. Though he never said it outright, I sensed that he had shifted his hopes for the future, from my mother to me investing in my potential the way he once had in hers. In early October, everything changed with a single phone call from my mother's neighbor. Grandfather had collapsed while mowing his lawn and been rushed to the hospital. Initial tests suggested a minor heart attack, though further evaluation was needed. I immediately packed an overnight bag and caught the first bus home, my heart pounding with fear the entire 3-hour journey. The hospital was a maze of sterile corridors and beeping machines. When I finally found his room, I was shocked by how small he looked in the hospital bed, his usual robust presence diminished by illness and medical equipment. He brightened when he saw me, reaching out a hand that seemed frailer than I remembered. "This is just a little bump in the road, sunshine," he assured me, using his childhood nickname for me. "The doctors are being cautious, but I'll be back to gardening in no time." I stayed by his bedside, alternating between forced cheerful conversation and silent worry. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but recommended several lifestyle changes and stress reduction. While they didn't specifically mention family stress, I couldn't help thinking about the burden he had taken on supporting me financially and emotionally, while navigating his complex relationship with my mother. On the second day, I returned from the hospital cafeteria to find my mother sitting beside grandfather's bed. It was the first time I had seen her in person since leaving Harold's house. She looked thinner with new lines around her eyes and more grey in her hair than I remembered. She stood awkwardly when she saw me attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Verlaine, she said, as if testing whether she still had the right to say my name. "You look well." The conversation that followed was strained but civil, both of us performing normalcy for grandfather's benefit. We discussed his condition, the doctor's recommendations, and the logistics of his care once he was discharged. We carefully avoided any mention of Harold or the circumstances of my departure. As visiting hours ended, we walked silently to the parking lot together. In the fading evening light, she suddenly turned to me. "I've missed you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The house is so quiet without you." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to embrace her to fall back into being her daughter without complication. A larger part remembered all too clearly the years of emotional neglect, the countless times she had chosen Harold's approval over my well-being. "I need to focus on grandfather right now," I said finally. "But maybe we could get coffee sometime while I'm in town." She nodded too quickly. "I'd like that, very much." Over the next week, as grandfather recovered and prepared for discharge, I learned more about the financial dynamics I had been largely unaware of. Grandfather had not only been paying my tuition and living expenses, but had also been providing regular financial support to my mother for years, ostensibly for my benefit while I lived at home. These payments had continued even after I left, creating a dependency that Harold had come to rely on. During a quiet moment, when we were alone, grandfather explained his decision to change this arrangement. "I've been enabling a situation that isn't healthy for anyone," he said, adjusting his position in the hospital bed. "Your mother and Harold need to take responsibility for their own finances instead of depending on my retirement funds." He assured me that my educational expenses would continue to be covered, but he would now make payments directly to the university rather than through my mother. "Your education was always what that money was intended for," he explained. "Not Harold's golf membership or your mother's designer handbags." The revelation was shocking but also clarifying. So much of the household tension around money made sense now. Harold's resentment of my educational aspirations, my mother's anxiety about finances, their shared hostility toward my relationship with grandfather, all stemmed from this financial dependence. As grandfather recovered at home, my mother's behavior toward me shifted noticeably. Her text messages became more frequent, her tone warmer and more interested in my life. She suggested lunch dates and shopping trips to reconnect, speaking as if our estrangement had been a simple misunderstanding rather than the result of years of emotional neglect. At first, I was cautiously hopeful that this represented genuine change. Had my absence and grandfather's health scare given her perspective on what truly mattered? But subtle patterns emerged that raised red flags. Her questions began to focus on grandfather's financial decisions and my awareness of them. "Has Grandpa mentioned anything about changing his will? Or does he talk to you about his investments?" During a lunch at my once favourite sandwich shop, she casually mentioned financial struggles at home. "Harold's company is going through restructuring," she explained, stirring her iced tea nervously. "And with your grandfather's decision about the monthly support, things are tight." The subtext became increasingly clear. Her renewed interest in me was connected to her hope that I could influence grandfather to resume financial support. The realization was a fresh wound atop barely healed scars. I was valuable to her not as a daughter, but as a potential financial conduit. I maintained the cordial facade through the remainder of grandfather's recovery, unwilling to create additional stress for him. But inside, I was processing yet another maternal betrayal, another confirmation that I would never receive the unconditional love I had craved since childhood. 3 weeks after returning to campus, I received a text from my mother asking if she could visit. "I miss seeing your face," she wrote, adding that she had some things to discuss that would be better in person. Despite my misgivings, I agreed, suggesting we meet at my apartment on Saturday afternoon. When Saturday arrived, I felt uncharacteristically nervous. I cleaned the already tidy apartment, changed my outfit twice, and prepared a simple snack tray with coffee, as if hosting a stranger rather than my own mother. Lisa had tactfully arranged to be out for the afternoon, giving us privacy for whatever uncomfortable conversation lay ahead. The knock came precisely at 2. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see my mother had made an unusually strong effort with her appearance. Her hair was freshly coloured and styled, her makeup carefully applied, her outfit new and fashionable. She carried a large gift bag and wore a bright, determined smile. "Your place is lovely," she said, stepping inside and looking around with exaggerated interest. "So cozy and independent. You've really created a nice life here." The conversation started with superficial pleasantries. She commented on my furnishings, asked about my roommate, and shared carefully curated updates about neighbours and distant relatives. I nodded and responded appropriately, waiting for her to reveal the true purpose of her visit. After about 20 minutes, she reached for the gift bag she had brought. "I found some things I thought you might want to have here," she said, handing it to me with a flourish. Inside were childhood photos, report cards, and memorabilia I had left behind. My science fair ribbons, handmade Mother's Day cards, and even the shell collection from our last family beach vacation before the divorce. The sight of these carefully preserved pieces of my past brought unexpected emotion. She had kept these things, treasured them, even while simultaneously failing to protect the child who had created them. "Remember this day?" she asked, pointing to a photo of us at an amusement park, both smiling with cotton candy in hand. "You were so happy. We were happy then, weren't we?" The reminiscing continued, each memory carefully selected to emphasize moments of maternal connection and family harmony. It was a curated history that omitted the neglect, the emotional absence, the countless times she had chosen Harold's approval over my well-being. I played along, recognizing the emotional manipulation, but curious about where it would lead. That became clear when she casually mentioned, "I drove by myself today. Harold's waiting in the car. He's been so stressed about finances lately." The transition was almost impressive in its calculated nature. From nostalgic memories directly to financial hardship, creating an emotional backdrop for the request I now knew was coming. "The thing is, Verlaine," she continued, voice dropping to a confidential tone, "things have been really difficult since your grandfather stopped his monthly support. Harold's company is downsizing and his position isn't secure." I remained silent, waiting for her to reach her point without assistance. "I was hoping," she continued, filling my silence with nervous words, "that maybe you could talk to Grandpa about reconsidering his decision. He listens to you, values your opinion. If you explained how hard this is on the family." "What family would that be?" I asked quietly, the words escaping before I could consider them. She looked startled, then hurt. "Our family, of course. Your family." "The same family where Harold read my private journal and gave ultimatums about my education. The family where you stood silently by while he belittled my dreams and controlled every aspect of our lives. That family." Colour rose in her cheeks. "That's not fair, Verlaine. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the compromises necessary to make a blended family work." "What compromises did Harold make?" I asked. "Because from where I stood, you and I did all the compromising while he made all the rules." The conversation quickly deteriorated from there. My mother's facade of warm nostalgia crumbled, revealing the true desperation beneath. Harold blamed me, she explained, for their financial difficulties. He believed Grandfather had chosen sides because of my dramatic exit and exaggerated complaints about life at home. "He's threatened to leave if things don't improve financially," she admitted, finally, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't lose him, Verlaine. I can't be alone again." The raw truth of that statement hung in the air between us. She couldn't be alone again, and that fear, that desperate need for companionship at any cost, had driven every decision she had made since my father left, including the choice to sacrifice her relationship with her only child. "So you're asking me to convince Grandfather to keep funding Harold's lifestyle because you're afraid of being alone?" I clarified, my voice steady, despite the storm of emotions inside me. "I'm asking you to help your mother during a difficult time," she countered, wiping at her tears. "Is that so wrong, after everything I've done for you?" The question ignited a lifetime of suppressed anger. "What exactly have you done for me, Mom? When did you ever stand up for me against Harold? When did you ever prioritize my well-being over his comfort? Even now, you're not here because you miss me or want to repair our relationship. You're here because you want me to solve your financial problems. Her expression hardened defensiveness, replacing vulnerability. That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you. But not enough to protect me, not enough to put me first, not even now. What followed was the most honest conversation we had ever had, painful in its clarity. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, of failing to understand the sacrifices she had made. I pointed out that her sacrifices had primarily served Harold, not me. She claimed I had always been difficult, too sensitive, too unwilling to adapt. I countered that children shouldn't have to adapt to emotional neglect and controlling behavior. Finally pushed beyond her ability to maintain pretense, she said the words that confirmed my deepest fears. If you won't help me with this, then maybe it's better if we don't see each other for a while. I need to focus on saving my marriage. The statement was intended as leverage, a threat to compel compliance. Instead, it offered a strange sort of relief, a confirmation that my assessment of her priorities had been accurate all along. She would always choose Harold over me. The clarity was painful but necessary. I think you should leave, I said quietly. And please tell Harold I said hello. After she left, I sat motionless on the couch, surrounded by the childhood memorabilia she had brought, physical remnants of a relationship that had always been conditional. The tears came eventually, not the violent sobs I might have expected, but a quiet, steady stream of grief for the mother I had needed and never had. When Lisa returned, she found me still sitting there, photos and mementos scattered around me like archaeological evidence of a lost civilization. Without asking questions, she sat beside me and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Family stuff?" she asked simply. I nodded, leaning into her support. "She only wants me when she needs something from me. Then she's missing out on knowing an amazing person," Lisa said firmly. "Her loss, not yours." In that moment, I understood that family is not just about blood or legal ties. It's about who shows up, who stays, who sees your value beyond what you can provide. By that definition, Lisa was more family to me after a year of friendship than my mother had been for much of my life. The days following my mother's visit were a blur of emotional processing. I alternated between numb detachment and waves of grief so intense they left me physically exhausted. Lisa was incredibly supportive, giving me space when I needed it and company when solitude became too heavy. I called grandfather and shared the entire interaction. His sigh was heavy with a complex mixture of disappointment and resignation. "I've known your mother her entire life," he said, "and I've never understood her choices. But I do know this isn't about you, Verlaine. Her inability to be the mother you deserve reflects her limitations, not your worth." An emergency session with Dr. Kim helped me begin to process this latest maternal betrayal. "What you're experiencing is a complex grief," she explained. "You're mourning not just the current relationship, but the idealized relationship you never had and now understand you likely never will have." She guided me through exercises to externalize my feelings, to recognize them without judgment, and to honor the pain without allowing it to define me. "Your mother's choices have shaped your past," she reminded me, "but they don't have to determine your future." The wisdom of that statement became my mantra as I redirected my emotional energy into my education and research. I threw myself into a challenging research project on the effects of microplastics on marine ecosystems, working long hours in the lab and finding solace in the clear parameters and measurable outcomes of scientific inquiry. My friends formed a protective circle around me. Lisa managed shared spaces with intuitive sensitivity to my needs. My study group adjusted meeting times to accommodate my therapy appointments without question or judgment. Professor Winters noticed my emotional struggle and offered both academic flexibility and quiet mentorship, sharing her own experiences navigating difficult family dynamics while building a scientific career. 2 months after my mother's visit, I was selected to present my research at an undergraduate conference on marine conservation. Standing at the podium before peers and professors from universities across the country, I felt a surge of confidence that transcended my family circumstances. This achievement was mine alone, built on my intelligence, dedication, and passion rather than anyone else's approval or support. The presentation was a success, earning recognition from the department and establishing my reputation as a promising young researcher. The Marine Research Centre, where I had interned the previous summer, offered me a position for the upcoming season, this time with a stipend that would further my financial independence. With Dr. Kim's guidance, I drafted an email to my mother establishing clear boundaries for our future interaction. I explained that while I remained open to a relationship, it would have to be built on mutual respect, rather than financial manipulation or emotional exploitation. I detailed the behaviors I would and would not accept, the topics that were open for discussion, and my expectations for honest communication. Her initial response was predictably defensive, a mixture of hurt accusations and misrepresentation of past events. I did not engage with these tactics, simply restating my boundaries and expressing hope that she might eventually understand my perspective. Over the following months, our communication was minimal but notably free from manipulation. Whether this represented growth or simply resignation to the new terms of engagement remained unclear. My relationship with grandfather deepened as he recovered fully from his health scare. Our Sunday calls evolved into rich discussions about everything from marine conservation to philosophy, current events, to family history. He shared stories about his own parents and childhood that helped me understand the context of my mother's upbringing and the generational patterns that had shaped our family. Harold was completely removed from my life, a deliberate excision that brought immediate relief. I no longer had to guard against his criticism, judgment, or control. My mother occasionally made oblique references to him in our limited communications, but I never inquired further. His influence had dominated too much of my life already. I refused to grant him space in my hard-won independence. As my sophomore year drew to a close, I reflected on the transformation of the previous 18 months. From the terrified teenager sneaking out of Harold's house with 2 suitcases to the confident young scientist presenting research at academic conferences, my journey had been one of both loss and discovery. I had lost the illusion of unconditional maternal love, but gained a clearer understanding of my own worth, independent of parental validation. 1 year after my mother's revealing visit, I could look back with perspective rather than raw pain. The experience had forced me to confront difficult truths about family dynamics and conditional love, but it had also accelerated my growth toward emotional maturity and self-sufficiency. Dr. Kim helped me recognize that my worth wasn't tied to my mother's ability to properly value me. Some parents aren't capable of giving their children what they need, she explained. Not because the children are unworthy, but because the parents themselves are wounded or limited in ways that restrict their capacity for healthy love. This understanding didn't erase the pain of maternal rejection, but provided a framework that allowed me to process it without internalizing it as reflection of my value. My mother's limitations were hers to own, not mine to compensate for or be diminished by. Grandfather's unwavering support demonstrated what healthy family love should look like: consistent, respectful of boundaries, encouraging of growth and independence. Through him, I learned that family bonds at their best are not shackles of obligation, but foundations of support, not conditional transactions, but expressions of genuine care. My chosen family expanded beyond Lisa to include other friends who demonstrated through consistent action that they valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. Together, we created a community based on mutual support, shared values, and authentic connection, proving that meaningful relationships could exist without manipulation or conditional acceptance. As I prepared for my junior year with its increased research responsibilities and advanced coursework, I felt a sense of balance and purpose that had once seemed unattainable. The path forward was not without challenges, but I faced them with confidence, born of survived adversity and proven resilience. The most profound lesson of my journey was the power of boundaries to create freedom. By clearly defining what I would and would not accept in relationships, I had created space for genuine connection and personal growth. By recognizing my right to distance myself from harmful dynamics, I had opened possibilities for healthier attachments. My relationship with my mother continued to evolve on these new terms. Our communication remained limited, but had developed a cautious authenticity previously absent. She no longer attempted financial manipulation, and I no longer expected maternal nurturing she was incapable of providing. It wasn't the relationship I had longed for as a child, but it was honest in its limitations, which represented its own kind of progress. Looking toward the future, I felt optimistic about my academic and career prospects. The marine biology program at PCU was opening doors to research opportunities and professional connections that would shape my future in scientific conservation. The emotional resilience developed through family challenges had unexpectedly prepared me for the persistence required in scientific research. The journey had taught me that self-worth cannot be outsourced to parental approval or validation. True confidence comes from within, built on self-knowledge, clear values, and consistent action aligned with those values. The approval I had desperately sought from my mother was ultimately less valuable than the self-respect I had earned through standing firm in my boundaries. Freedom I discovered was not the absence of painful history, but the presence of conscious choice in how that history would shape my future. The emotional neglect I had experienced was not a sentence to perpetual insecurity, but an opportunity to define love and connection on my own terms, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. As I stood on the threshold of my junior year, I carried forward not just academic knowledge, but hard-won wisdom about human connection, personal boundaries, and emotional resilience. The path had been painful, but had led to a stronger, more authentic self than would have emerged from an easier journey. What would you do if the family member only reached out when they needed something from you? Have you ever had to create boundaries with loved ones for your own well-being? I hope my story gives you strength if you're facing similar challenges. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's difficult moments, and share with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in these struggles.